All right, so welcome everyone. I'm very excited to have you all here. Just a little bit about myself. I'm Christina. I'm the founder of the UX Design Talk community. And really the goal with this community is to help designers, especially the ones who are just at the start of their careers, come together and help each other support and learn as much as possible while they navigate this breaking into the industry, or they even navigate the first years into the industry. But everyone is welcome, and we always have different events. So, if you need a safe space or a fun space to be to learn more about design, please join in. And today we have an amazing guest speaker. We have Nick Cuda. He is joining us from, he's a senior product designer at Mailchimp, and we are going to talk about what to expect when you first start career in design and how we're going to break down this hour. We have Nick. He's gonna guide us through a short presentation, and then we're gonna go straight to the Q&A, and we have a lot of questions to go through. We've received a lot of questions for Nick, which is amazing. We are gonna try to go through as many as possible, but please forgive me if we can't get to all of them. And the last 15 minutes, we're gonna use them for live Q&A. So if you have any questions for Nick, please jump in and put your camera on and just ask any questions that you have. So without any further ado, Nick, you have the stage.
Awesome, thank you. And thank you everybody for joining. This is an awesome turnout, and thanks for the list of questions. Yeah, we hope to get through as many of those as possible. Like Christina said, I'm Nick Cuda. I'm a senior product designer at Mailchimp. Been working here for a little over a year. My pronouns are he, him. That is my dog, Abby, who sleeps right behind me. So if you hear her snoring, it's not me. And yeah, we can jump right into this. So yeah, the theme of this is kind of like what to expect when starting your design career. So I just wanted to really briefly talk through 3 assumptions that I see a lot from product designers, and honestly 3 assumptions that I share with people. And I hope y'all enjoy word art as much as I do. So let's get started. What to expect when starting your design career. But first of all, a little more background on me, selfishly. Again, senior product designer. I've been a product designer for about 8 years or 9 years. I'm not really sure anymore. But I was born and raised in Utica, New York, which is upstate, not Westchester, not Albany, upstate. So I was born in the cold, and I traded rain and snow for earthquakes and wildfires, as I am now based in Los Angeles. I got my associate's degree in graphic design. I wasn't sure where I wanted to go, but I knew I wanted to do something in design. So I saved some money there, right? And then I spent that money by transferring to a 4-year university where I got my bachelor's degree in graphic design, and that was in Philadelphia. 9 years experience, I lied. But working as a consultant and both as an in-house designer as well. One of my fondest memories was that I used to have to get the CEO's lunch every day at one of the companies I worked for. Yay, workplaces. I'm just kidding. But I started my professional career at a software development company called EPAM Systems, where I was able to work for a lot of the clients that you'll see here. That was like my introduction into what product design was. It was actually before it was called product design. We were kind of separated out into visual designers and UX designers. I was a visual designer. So, naturally working very closely with engineers and UX designers, those things started to combine, and that turned into UI UX designer, that turned into interaction designer, experience designer, and now it's product designer. And we'll see what it is in a few years, but I'm excited to see y'all there. Awesome. So we all make assumptions, right? It's very natural. If we didn't make assumptions in what we do, we wouldn't be able to test hypotheses with people, and we wouldn't be able to figure out what's right or wrong, right? But that's not what we're here to talk about. We're here to talk about some assumptions we make about what our design career is going to be like, right? whether you came from a 2-year or 4-year university, whether you came from a boot camp, right? There's all these expectations you might have that may or may not be true when you start working, right? The first of which is that, oh, sorry, I'll let this load for a second. But the first of which is that our work needs to be unique and original. Of course, we can be original, but it's very easy to overthink a design solution in hopes of being original, right? When I think of this, I'm always reminded of this image, where it's really showing the importance of communication in the product design process, especially with users, right? Customers may have an idea of what they want, but they may not know how best to get there, right? And we may not know how best to get there, which is why we need to test and communicate. But I think this is pretty funny how the customer explained it: marketing, design, engineering, product. And then what they really needed was just a tire tied to a rope for a tree, right? So I thought that was pretty funny. But people are so much more tech savvy nowadays, right, than they were 5, 10 years ago. So, they're really starting to expect websites or apps or any sort of experience to like just work and work in similar ways, right? When you're designing an app for iOS, they'll have, shared navigation, right? Different from Android, right? That's what I'm talking about. Like these people who are immersed in these devices all the time sort of have these expectations of how things should work. So sometimes they just want something familiar. This is my message to y'all that like, it's okay if we're not creating original and groundbreaking solutions, right? The best experience is an experience where someone doesn't need to guess what's going to happen next, or they don't even need to think about what's going to happen next. They do something and whatever they thought or wanted happened, right? Easier said than done. The second assumption that I see a lot is that we'll see every product from start to finish. And I hate to be the one to break this to you, but that will not happen. And that's okay. It happens everywhere. Things change. If I had $1 for every project I didn't design from start to finish, I have $27. That means I could get 4.5 gallons of gas right now, which is pretty good. But yeah, the reality is things change a lot. And I'm sure most of y'all know this, whether it's requirements or budgets, timelines, or like people resources too, right? The size of your team is going to determine how much work you can put out. But yeah, change isn't a bad thing. It's definitely not always easy, but just know that we all go through it. I go through it in my current roles. I went through it in past roles. It's just kind of like the nature of the beast of product design, right? And then assumption number 3 is that everyone thinks just like us. Whether it's talking about like empathy and stuff like that, that's just not the case. Not everyone is as user-centric or as empathetic as we are. And that makes sense because we're literally trained to think in that way as product designers, right? We're trained to think about the user. Where I think it's getting a lot better, but it was a little more difficult. Like when I was in school, is like they didn't really teach us to think about the business side of things, right? So this was very surprising to me when I first started out, especially when thinking around like creating an MVP or minimum viable product, right? I would always get so upset when features that I think were making the product like objectively better, and they were very user-centric features, right, would get pushed off because the business needs to make money, right? And there's always going to be that trade-off. But yeah, so, when thinking of that MVP, some features that weren't beneficial they don't always make it into the first release. And it could be for a few reasons, right? There could be a list of priorities, and while feature X is important, it's being prioritized for a further release. Or perhaps some team members just don't realize how beneficial that feature could be to users. And that's where we come in, right? Sometimes we're alone in this. We work on smaller teams. We might be the only designer. So it could be up to us to communicate the importance of certain features and how they're going to affect people. But the important thing for us is to always take into account like when we're thinking about the user side of things, you got to also think about the business side of things, because people are going to want to hear both. But yeah, so the second example here, like team members not, understanding the benefit of a feature is just letting us know how important it is for us to clearly articulate our design solutions. So yeah, if you think about it, like if a stakeholder were to come to you with a feature request and they mention 3 ways it'll benefit the business and they don't mention users at all, you're going to take a step back and you're going to be like, oh, whoa, that's great and all that it'll help the business, but how are we going to help the users, right? There are definitely people on our teams that think the opposite, where we're only talking about the users and we're not talking about the business. So combining those is always super like crucial in my mind. And yeah, that's it. I just wanted to be super brief with that because I want to give y'all a chance to ask questions. I think we have a pretty long list, but then hopefully, yeah, we can open it up in the end for others to ask questions as well. But here's where you can find me. That's my website, and I post every now and then on LinkedIn, but that's pretty much it.
Awesome. Thank you, Nick. And I think your word art presentation is a success.
Thank you.
Because there's a lot of nostalgia happening in the chat, and I love that everybody's loving it.
Yeah. I told Christina that my style for presentations borders on ironically bad. So I kind of dig that. Yeah.
Okay, so let us go to, I'm gonna come in here. Okay, so yeah, we have a lot of questions. So thank you for the presentation and the assumptions. I'm gonna go to the first question, and that is, what's the most challenging and rewarding part of your job?
Yeah. Let's see. So the most challenging, I'd say the most challenging is like understanding what people want. You saw that image, right, that I showed you. People aren't always the best at describing what they want, right? So sometimes we need to decipher that. And that's where testing things comes into play. I think that's the most challenging because it takes the most time and resources and planning. But I also think it is the most rewarding. To give you an example, we were working on sort of some data visualizations not too long ago. And we had some assumptions, but I created like a few different options. And, in some of the customer interviews, they had no idea that we were actually like testing this specific feature, but they brought up that specific feature, which I think that's the most rewarding part, is like when your work does get recognized by the people who are actually using it, or when somebody says like, oh yeah, that's really easy, but I also think that's the most challenging part of the job. So I think that they are sometimes one and the same.
And going to the second question is, what are the typical expectations of a UX designer in their first role? So let's say somebody new starts at your company and an intern or UX design junior. What are the expectations everybody else on the team are going to have towards that person?
Yeah. Well, if you go by job descriptions, everybody wants 1 to 3 years of experience of research for an intro UX designer, which I just don't think is realistic. I will say, I'll just speak from like my experience. When we hire product designers, we don't have UX specific designers. We have UX researchers, we have product designers, we have a lot of different designers, but mainly product. But when we hire product designers where they're in their first or second role, really it's just the eagerness to learn. And, the experience will come, but I think I'm getting hung up on like the job description thing, because I have so many designers that talk to me. They're like, how can I get this experience? And I know personally for me, like I don't expect years of experience for someone for their first UX design role, right? But yeah, I'd say the eagerness to learn and like try new things and being proactive. Those are 3 buzzwords that everyone uses, but I really think that it's important to show your new team like, hey, I want to learn, I want to gain these experiences, right? So as much as I hate buzzwords, I think I'm going to stick with that answer.
I think coming from that one, and a lot of designers have that question, who makes the numbers? I mean, as you say, you're not looking for 3 years of experience. Who does? Why is it going on the job requirements? And, why is it there in the first place?
Yeah, unfortunately, I don't have that answer. I think that would depend on the hiring managers and the recruiting team and whoever is writing the job descriptions, but I don't have any insight into that specifically. Um, but yeah, I'd be happy to follow up somehow if I can ever figure that out.
Awesome. Okay, so what do you wish you knew before starting your career in design?
That I wasn't just going to be designing. I think that's an
Really?
assumption that I could have put into this presentation as well, right? I think a lot of the boot camps are doing a great job at emphasizing research, but I majored in graphic design, as y'all heard, and so there wasn't any research that I knew of, right? I wasn't taught how to do research. So yeah, that would have been nice to know or nice to have some experience in beforehand. But and I didn't come from a boot camp, so I can't speak for everybody. But from talking to people, I feel like they're doing a lot better. But yeah, research for sure.
Do you do that with, do you have a UX research team to help you out, or is it mostly the product designers that have to do the research?
Yeah, we have an entire UX research team, and we utilize them for like bigger efforts because they are very, very good researchers. However, as product designers, like we can just run tests if we want to. It's not that we can't, it's just that like the tests that they run are much different and way in depth. And the designs that we run are, I think, a little more surface level. Whereas like we're running user tests and we're testing prototypes with people and we're kind of doing these moderated or unmoderated sessions. But yeah, so we do both. It just depends on what the project is.
And do you know of any red flags to look out for when designers are just starting their career?
The word fast-paced environment. Um, I'm just kidding, but I'm kind of not. If you're reading a job description with a lot of those buzzwords, again, I'm kind of biased because I don't like those buzzwords. But I think inclusion starts there, right? Like you got to write for everybody. You can't write to be trendy or for a specific group of people. So I don't know. I tend to be really turned off by those. In terms of like starting your first design job, I guess is the question any red flags once you've already got the job or red flags before you're about to accept? Because those could be two different things.
I think we can look at once you got the job in the
Yeah.
context of our theme today. Yeah.
Yeah. So I can give a very specific example because it happened to me when I moved to LA. My first job, my fiance and I both moved out here without jobs in 2017. And the first job I got was about a month after living here. Some CTO reached out to me on Dribble, right? Because he liked what I was posting. And I needed a job. And so we talked and we talked, and he kind of, promised that, he was building this team, right? So I was the first design hire and things were going great. I think the red flag that I saw, and I only stayed there for about 8 months or 10 months, was that the project that I was working on was creating a task management system for VFX artists. And when I sat down with people who had been there for 8, 10, 12 years, nobody could give me the same direction or the same kind of vision that they had for this product. And a lot of them were contradicting. So the red flag there, I think, is like top-down alignment. If the executives are, not aligned, then the odds are it's going to be way more difficult for us to do our jobs and create what they're telling us to create.
Yeah, I can see how that can be very challenging, especially when you run into something like that. Okay, next question. We actually had a few of them, so I kind of combined them, and it's about mentorship. And we know how important mentorship is for any designer. So, what does effective mentorship look like in your experience, and how do you find a mentor at work?
Yeah. That is a great question. Effective mentorship, I think, can depend on you as a person. What type of communication style do you like? What type of feedback do you like? Some people like way more direct feedback. Some people don't like way more direct feedback. Some people like managers that are like a little more on top of them. You know what I mean? Like checking in more frequently, and some like way more autonomy. So I think that's up to you to figure out as a designer, like, but it's trial and error, right? You're not going to get it on the first try. For me personally, I like the very healthy mix of check-ins and autonomy. I don't like check-ins every day. It kind of feels like micromanaging to me for certain projects. Um, Finding a mentor at work, I think, can be really difficult. Mailchimp is actually the first role that I accepted as a full-time role, and I never thought I would accept a full-time role, and that makes it even harder. So I think just by nature of like not meeting anyone in person in the year that I've been here, it kind of sticks me to the team that I'm within, right? So I mean, my manager kind of naturally just became my mentor at work. Um, she pushes me in and out of work, right? She pushes me to do talks, she pushes me to write things, and she also pushes me at work. But yeah, I think it's pretty subjective based on your experience and honestly the size of the team and company.
Mm. And to that, how do you measure your progress as a product designer, and what milestones you look out for? And do you put
Yeah,
milestones for yourself?
yeah, I do. But not as much as I want to. That's something I want to get better at, is like planning. I'm kind of a go with the flow kind of guy. um, but yeah, actually, in one of my roles, I specifically remember like we would always have reviews, I think like quarterly. And they would always mention, yeah, you just need to check off X, Y, and Z, right? And at the next review, I'd be like, okay, great, I checked off X, Y, and Z. Like, what do we do now? And they would just keep adding to the list. And so I hated that because I didn't feel like I was progressing. I felt like I was just checking things off a list. So I think something that's really great to do that was introduced to me was to create a win book as a product designer, or a brag book, or just some place that you can just briefly write about the projects that you did. It doesn't have to be specific to in the office or in freelance or just personal, right? You can just create a list of wins, no matter how big, no matter how small, right? Um, I think that's super helpful in terms of tracking your progress, because you can literally see things that you did. I'm pretty forgetful. If you ask me about a project I did a year ago, probably won't be able to describe it to you in too much detail. So having that is super helpful, and it helps in reviews as well. Um, so milestones, let's see. That one's more tough, I think, because I don't have specific milestones that I look for. It kind of depends on the role that I'm in. So right now we're kind of building a product from the ground up on the team that I'm on. So I think that'll make it a little easier to create these milestones. But when you're coming into a company that has an existing product, I think that could be pretty difficult. But yeah, I don't have specific ones right now.
Did you have to have a milestone when you moved from a product design position to a senior product design? Was it something you needed to
Um,
accomplish to get there?
that is a great question, and I have no answer for you. The most frustrating part of becoming a senior product designer was in my last job search. I'm very type A, so I created a spreadsheet of all these companies I applied to, all the ones I got interviews for, all the ones I got follow-ups for, all the ones I got rejected from, right? It's really like who sees your skills and capabilities and who's willing to take that chance, right? Um, what I was mentioning earlier, like they kept adding lists of or tasks to a list of things to do before I could be considered like a senior designer. That was at a smaller company. They had less funding. They they couldn't give you the salary raises and stuff. And honestly, I applied to like 60 places. I had a lot of research experience. I had a lot of design experience, and I got rejected from some and I got accepted from others. There wasn't really anything that I noticed other than, experience that can be visually shown in a project. I mean, like, years of experience are great and they're always going to get you past those introductory calls. Um, but yeah, I think maybe not a milestone, but a skill that helped me get past that is definitely articulating my impact on the project. That's huge. You got to be able to sell yourself for sure.
And to that, what are the top 3 soft skills that lead to career sustainability?
Oh man, communication is the biggest one. I'm a big fan of the book and podcast Radical Candor. I love that. I told you I hate buzzwords. I don't like beating around the bush. I like figuring things out, right? So I would definitely say communication for sure. Oh man, this is hard. The top 3 soft skills, career sustainability. Communication will take you a long way. I'd say being humble, and that comes in a few different forms, but like having strong opinions, but loosely holding them, right? And being able to take criticism is huge. If you are feeling so passionate about something that it's just so hard for you to hear other people's, conflicting opinions, it's going to make you harder to work with, right? It's going to make it harder for people to want to try to give criticism or to want to make things better. Um, I don't know if that's really a soft skill as much of a personality trait, and that's not really fair to ask people to do. Um, but yeah, let's see. Communication. I'm trying to think. I think that's all I can think of right now, but I will keep thinking on that.
Communication and feedback, as you said, I think.
Yeah.
Um, okay, so what advice do you have for UX designers with no tech background that want to work in tech?
The only way to get design experience is to start, right? But also, you don't have to have been in tech to have that experience. I used to do a lot of like just free mentoring sessions. I do still now sometimes, but not as much. Um, but I talked to a lot of people that didn't have tech backgrounds. Some were teachers, some were, I don't even know, like business or finance, or they worked in nonprofits. But I think the common theme that I started to notice was that they did have the like thinking process. Do you know what I mean? Like, they were kind of thinking in the design thinking way, and they understood what research would be. They may not just had that hard experience, right? So just because you don't have a tech background doesn't mean you're not going to be a great designer. But you do have to start somewhere, and I think that's the hardest part.
And to the point of communication, how do you pitch design decisions to other teams who aren't fully on board with the designs yet?
Yeah, data for sure. Always. I am a big fan of being able to justify my design decisions. I'm not going to propose a design change or a feature just because I think it would be cool, right? There's always got to be a reason, and those reasons are going to help you sell other people. This kind of goes back to what I was saying, the last assumption, like everybody thinks like us, they don't. So that's where our skills come in, like gathering that feedback, right? If you're pitching a feature, right? Let's say, I don't know, you sifted through 200 survey responses, and you notice, like, here are the 3 themes that keep coming up, and here's why I think it's important to pitch these projects. You have to sell it that way. That's going to benefit you so much. So hitting people with data, super helpful. Just have to be able to communicate it in the right way, right? We're not shaming people for not knowing this data. We're educating them because we do know it.
Yeah, and what are the tools that you're actually using more often, most often in your work?
Slack. Slack and Figma for sure. Um, let's see. For testing, we use user testing. We use Miro more for like company-wide, like whiteboarding sessions and like big team meetings. But FigJam is great as well. We're trying to get more people to use that so that it's one less tool we need to use. So yeah, I'd say FigJam or Figma with FigJam, and then Miro, and I mean, Slack doesn't really count. So let's say the Google Suite, because we're in Docs and Confluence and Jira and all of those tools. Yeah, but that varies from company too, right? Some companies still use Sketch, they use Adobe XD, but we use Figma.
Are there any favorite resources that you have to learn even more about design that you're doing either at work or outside of work? And how do you kind of work on your craft and improve on yourself?
Yeah, that's a good question. So there's a series of books that I love to recommend to people called A Book Apart, and they are super thin. They're like 100 to 130 pages, maybe. And there are a lot of really good ones on design and research and UX and development, right? So I love those books. I have a few of them. I don't know where they are. They're over there, but that's okay. But yeah, they're called A Book Apart. I really love them. Other than that, I'm on awards a lot. The website AWWW kind of just looking at what people are doing. Um, I used to post to Dribble a lot. Dribble is kind of like Instagram for designers. People will like design for Dribble. I use that for like visual inspiration, but I don't really use it for functional inspiration, if that makes sense.
Awesome. Okay. It's like a bigger question here. It's UX isn't static, and as business changes, we see Venn diagrams forming around UX with related disciplines like service design and customer experience. Have you seen examples of this in your work?
I haven't seen specific like Venn diagrams in this, but yes, we absolutely work with service designers and customer experience, right? Going back to what I mentioned around like the survey results example, um, customer experience, like customer experience agents, CX agents, they're the ones that are fielding responses and answering questions for customers, right? So they're going to know firsthand, what are people asking for? What are people complaining about? What's broken? What could be better, right? So service designers and customer experience should definitely be your friends as a product designer, because they will help you sell the features that you want to create, or they'll help you, defend, I don't know, any sort of design decision.
Awesome. And I think it's more towards your work question, but how many projects do you work on in a year on average?
Um, on average, I think I'm on my fourth project at Mailchimp. Um, but yeah, my fourth like different project at Mailchimp. I'd say like 4 to 6 maybe. Um, but yeah, that varies because like at one of my other roles at like an agency, you're working much faster pace. The projects are a lot shorter. So sometimes I work on like 10 or 12 in a year. But again, not start to finish because that rarely happens.
And doing that, oh, even with the projects at work, do you still keep your portfolio updated even after working in
Hell
a job?
no.
But do
Hell
you still have
no.
to pay for the website, right?
Yes, I still get charged every month, and every month I'm like, why? Why? No, I'm pretty bad at keeping my website updated. It's a lot of work. Y'all know this. I developed my first website after graduating from school because I was like, hell yeah, these people are going to love that I coded and designed my entire responsive website. Nobody looked at the website. They just wanted a PDF of all of the work that I've done. And I have never been more bummed. So since then, I only use Squarespace. I'm not sponsored by them, so I don't have a discount code for you. I tried Webflow. It's just, I don't want to put that much time into it. So I am not the best person to ask for that if you were hoping for a different answer.
Um, awesome. Okay, we have two more questions before we go into the open Q&A.
Sure.
How do you deal with that initial struggle with, how do you handle that initial struggle with dealing with imposter syndrome generally as a new designer?
Yeah, goodness. I still deal with imposter syndrome. Doing these talks, I deal with imposter syndrome, right? Christina reached out to me and asked me to do this, and I was like, who am I to do this? No, but seriously. So, like in my last search, I had mentioned I applied to a lot of places. I was rejected from a lot of places. That starts to get in your head, right? Like, I know that I'm ready for this next jump into the senior role, but why is nobody giving me this opportunity? Um, how do I handle that internal struggle? Uh, Lots of walks with this one right here, being outside. No, I think the way to handle it, I don't think there's a right way to handle it. The way that I handle it is like it kind of fuels me to try even harder, which I'm not saying is the right thing to do, right? But the more I got rejected, the more I was like, okay, I'm going to change this. I'm going to change this. I'm going to ask for feedback. It kind of like fuels me. Um, but yeah, so I think like the positive spin on that is like taking that feedback and taking that rejection, being like, okay, what do I think went wrong? What can I do better? But sometimes it's so out of your control. There's nothing you could have done better. It's just, it may not have been the right timing. But yeah, I think everyone handles it differently. So I don't have a here's how you should handle it.
Awesome. Okay, and last question from us here would, should someone focus on becoming a unicorn designer, a generalist, or focus on specializing instead? And who finds more success?
Yeah, that is a good question. I think it depends on where you're applying to, right? If you want to become a unicorn designer, you're going to need a lot of experience. You're going to need a lot of projects, right? You're going to need to be able to show that you are that unicorn designer. I'm not sure what they meant by unicorn designer, but I feel like they meant someone who can do everything and is great at everything.
Developing as
And
well, I think, with
and
coding.
develop, oh my goodness. Good on you. If you're going to do that, that is phenomenal. But I think each one is kind of suited for different size companies, right? A unicorn, as we're calling it, someone who can design, research, and code. Like you may be better suited for like a startup where you need to do that stuff. But I will say, like at Mailchimp, yeah, we have a few people like that because their experience was in engineering and then they got into research and then they got into design. So it's like they've been doing this for 7 or 8 years. Um, but we have specific teams or a bigger company, so it may not be the case. I think I would lean towards a generalist just based on what I'm seeing from the market and from like people showing me all of these crazy job applications with buzzwords and 37 years of experience and all of this stuff, right? People do like uh, people who can do different tasks. Like just because we are designers, like I mentioned before, you're not just designing. You got to be able to talk to customers. You got to be able to research. So I think I'd lean towards a generalist. But I also don't want you to think I'm telling you what to do.
You're giving us insights. I think we're learning a lot. So we're taking, it's all about perspective. So seeing
Yeah.
your experience, I think it helps us in our experience. I know we're at the time. I really appreciate you coming on today, and talking to our community. If anybody has more questions for Nick, please drop them in the meetup comments. But really appreciate Nick for coming here today.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you all for coming. And for those of you that didn't get questions answered, feel free to follow me on LinkedIn and you can shoot me a message or connect. I'm not sure what you have to do, but anyone here, if y'all have questions, feel free to reach out to me there.
Awesome.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks, everyone, and have a good rest of your night.